No, no, it can't be. No, this isn't right. What have they done? My home. It's gone. I'm outside the house, but it's locked. They changed everything. Oh, no. I'm calling Attorney Evans right now. We need to fix this.
No, that's impossible. Check it again. Someone is trying to sell our house. Hello?
Yes, I'm here. It's even worse than we thought.
I need you to find out who filed this immediately. Don't wait.
3 days after my knee replacement surgery, I came home leaning on a walker and discovered my key no longer worked. At first, I thought I was doing something wrong. Then I saw the brand new electronic lock and moving boxes stacked behind my living room window. I called my daughter Rachel. "Mom, you're not coming back into that house," she said calmly. "We've made other arrangements for you." My hands started shaking, but I didn't argue. I hung up and called William Carter, the lawyer who had handled my affairs for years. After I explained what happened, he went silent. Then he said, "Jordan, don't confront Rachel yet. A title company called me this morning." My stomach dropped. "Your daughter is trying to sell your house. If your own daughter changed the locks while you were in the hospital, what would you do? Would you confront her immediately, or would you call a lawyer first? Tell me what you think in the comments. And while you're there, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. If stories about family betrayal, dignity, and finding the strength to stand up for yourself mean something to you, please like this video and subscribe. Because what Rachel had done to my front door was only the beginning, the daughter I never thought I would fear. 6 months before I stood on my own front porch with a useless key in my hand, I would have laughed if anyone had told me I would someday be afraid of my daughter. Rachel and I had always been close. After my husband Daniel died 4 years earlier, she became the person who called me every Sunday evening without fail. Sometimes we talked for 10 minutes. Sometimes we talked for an hour. She asked whether I had eaten, whether I had gone to church, whether I was still meeting my old library friends for lunch. I was 69, not helpless, but loneliness has a way of making ordinary attention feel precious. Daniel and I had lived in our Raleigh house for more than 30 years. We bought it when Rachel was still young enough to leave crayons underneath the dining room table. Back then, the neighborhood was quieter, the trees were smaller, and our mortgage payment felt enormous. Daniel used to joke that the bank owned more of the house than we did. Eventually, that changed. We paid off the mortgage several years before he died. The day the final payment cleared, Daniel opened a bottle of sparkling cider because neither of us drank much anymore. We sat on the back porch and toasted to owning every brick, every squeaky floorboard, and every stubborn azalea bush. After he was gone, I stayed. People occasionally asked whether I planned to downsize. I always gave the same answer: not until I want to. My retirement income was comfortable. I had my pension from years working as an elementary school librarian, Social Security savings. Daniel and I had built carefully and no mortgage. I wasn't wealthy, but I wasn't dependent on Rachel either. That distinction would become more important than I ever imagined. The first sign of trouble came one rainy Tuesday afternoon. Rachel called and asked if she and Mark could come over. They arrived carrying takeout from my favorite Italian restaurant. Rachel was unusually cheerful at first, asking about my garden and complimenting a new rug in the living room. Mark barely spoke. He kept rubbing his thumb against the edge of his water glass. Finally, Rachel put down her fork. "Mom, we need to ask you something." Mark owned a residential remodeling company. For years, he had done well renovating kitchens, bathrooms, and older homes around Raleigh, but several projects had recently fallen through. Rachel explained that cash flow was tight. "We're not in some terrible situation," she said quickly. "We just need to reduce expenses for a little while." Their lease was ending. "Would I mind if they stayed with me temporarily?" "How temporarily?" Rachel smiled. 4 weeks, maybe 6. I looked at Mark. "We'll stay out of your way," he promised. I had 3 bedrooms and more empty space than I needed. They were family. "Of course," I said. Rachel came around the table and hugged me. "You're saving us." At the time, those words made me feel useful. I didn't understand how dangerous it can become when someone begins confusing your generosity with their security. They moved in the following weekend. At first, having them there was wonderful. Rachel cooked dinner several nights a week. She drove me to a doctor's appointment when my knee was bothering me. Mark repaired a loose railing on the back steps without being asked. The house felt alive again. I would hear Rachel laughing in the kitchen, and sometimes for a few seconds, I could almost imagine Daniel walking through the door. 4 weeks passed. Then 6. Nobody mentioned moving. When I finally asked Rachel whether they had started looking for another place, she sighed. Mark needs a little more time. I didn't push. Soon Mark's tools began filling the garage. Boxes of tile samples appeared beside Daniel's old workbench. Lumber leaned against one wall. One morning I discovered my car parked outside because Mark needed the garage for equipment. I told myself it was temporary. Rachel began changing things inside the house too. She moved my coffee mugs because she thought they belonged closer to the machine. She reorganized my pantry. She replaced the curtains in the guest bedroom without asking. None of those things were serious. But there is a strange feeling that comes when someone begins rearranging your home as though your preferences are merely suggestions. Then I started noticing my mail. For decades, I had kept incoming mail in a small wooden tray near the kitchen. One afternoon, I found several envelopes on Rachel's desk instead. "Why do you have my mail?" She barely looked up. "I was sorting it for you." "I don't need you to sort it. I know, Mom. I was helping." She smiled, and I immediately felt guilty for sounding suspicious. That became a pattern. Rachel would cross a small boundary. I would object. She would call it help, and I would apologize. Then came the questions about the house. We were having coffee one morning when Rachel looked around the kitchen. "Have you ever thought about how much this place is worth now?" "Not really. You should." I shrugged. "I live here. Its value doesn't change where I sleep." She laughed. A few days later, she brought it up again. "This is a lot of house for one person. I've managed." "I know. I'm just thinking about the future." The future. Rachel began using that phrase constantly. What would I do in the future? Would I want stairs in the future? Would I still want to maintain a yard? Had Daniel and I ever discussed selling? I answered casually because I didn't understand that she was collecting information. One evening, Rachel showed me a senior community on her tablet. The apartments were attractive with gardens, a fitness room, and organized activities. "That looks nice," I said. Her face brightened. "I knew you'd like it. I said it looks nice. I didn't say I wanted to live there." Her smile tightened. "I'm just showing you options." I closed the tablet. I already have somewhere to live. For the first time, I saw irritation flash across my daughter's face. It disappeared almost immediately. "Of course you do." A week later, my orthopedic surgeon gave me the news I had been avoiding. My right knee had deteriorated badly enough that replacement surgery was the best option. I wasn't frightened of the surgery itself. I was worried about recovery. Rachel took my hand when I told her. "Mom, this is exactly why we're here. I can arrange home health if I need it. You won't need strangers. You have us." Her confidence reassured me. Over the next several weeks, she helped schedule appointments and made lists of things I would need after surgery. I remember sitting at the kitchen table one afternoon while she wrote everything down. Medication, physical therapy, meals, transportation. She looked so much like the daughter I trusted that I felt ashamed for ever being irritated about the mail or the garage. Then she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Don't worry about anything, Mom." I smiled. Rachel smiled back. "I'll take care of everything." I believed her. What I didn't know was that while I thought my daughter was preparing for my recovery, she had already started asking herself a very different question. Not how to help me stay in my home, but how much control she could have if I couldn't. The questions she asked before my surgery. In the weeks before my surgery, Rachel became the most attentive daughter a mother could have asked for. At least that was what I believed. She bought a shower chair for my bathroom, moved a small table beside my bed, and made a schedule for my medications. She even ordered one of those long-handled grabbers so I wouldn't have to bend down during recovery. Every thoughtful gesture made the questions that followed seem reasonable. One Saturday morning, she sat across from me at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad. "We should make an emergency list," she said. "What kind of emergency list?" "Insurance information." Doctors. Bank contacts. Things I might need if something happens while you're in surgery. I laughed. Rachel, I'm having my knee replaced. I'm not crossing the Atlantic in a rowboat. She didn't laugh. People should be prepared, Mom. That sounded sensible enough. I gave her the name of my insurance company and showed her where I kept my medical information. Then she asked, "Where do you keep the deed to the house?" I looked up. What does the house deed have to do with my knee? Nothing directly. She tapped her pen against the legal pad. I just think I should know where important documents are. My important documents are handled. By who? By me. She smiled, but there was something strained about it. I know that. I'm trying to help. There was that word again. Help. By then, I had learned that if I questioned Rachel too sharply, I somehow ended up feeling unreasonable. So I told her that Daniel and I had done our estate planning years earlier, and that William Carter, our attorney, had copies of anything important. Rachel wrote William's name down. Then came another question. Do you still have a power of attorney? I assume so. You assume it was part of the paperwork Daniel and I signed. Who did you name? I tried to remember. The documents had been prepared years before, when Daniel's health first began declining. There had been wills, healthcare directives, trust documents, financial authorizations, an entire stack of papers, William had explained carefully. At the time I understood them. Years later I couldn't remember every paragraph. I think you were named for some things I said. Rachel stopped writing. For what things I don't remember. Her eyes remained on me. You should know, Mom. And apparently, you think you should too. That came out sharper than I intended. Rachel leaned back. Forget I asked. Immediately I felt guilty. Rachel. No, it's fine. I know you're helping. Her expression softened. That's all I'm trying to do. The conversation ended, but the questions didn't. Over the next week, Rachel casually asked which bank held my checking account. Then she wanted to know where my retirement deposits went. Another day, she asked whether Daniel had left life insurance. I finally said, "Why are you so interested in my finances?" She looked genuinely offended. "I'm not interested in your money. I didn't say you wanted it. You're acting like I'm interrogating you. I said you're asking a lot of questions." Rachel stood up. "You're going into surgery. I'm your only daughter. If something happened and I didn't know anything, everyone would blame me." That silenced me. Because underneath everything else was a truth I couldn't ignore. Rachel was my only child. If I ever genuinely needed someone to step in, she was the obvious person. So I apologized. I wish I hadn't. Not because apologizing was wrong, because each time I apologized for protecting a boundary, I taught Rachel that persistence could move it. 2 days later, I returned from physical therapy preparation and found her in the small downstairs study. A filing cabinet drawer was open. "What are you looking for?" Rachel turned quickly. "The insurance folder. That's in the kitchen cabinet." "Oh." She closed the drawer. "Wrong place." I remember staring at her for an extra second. She walked past me carrying nothing. That evening I checked the filing cabinet. Nothing appeared missing, but several folders were out of order. Buried behind old tax records was a folder labeled Estate Documents. Inside were copies of papers Daniel and I had signed years earlier. I flipped through them without really reading. Trust documents, healthcare directives, a durable power of attorney. I saw Rachel's name. For one brief moment, uneasiness moved through me. Then I closed the folder. She was my daughter. That fact still outweighed my instincts. What I didn't know was that Rachel had already seen the document. And unlike me, she had paid very close attention to the words beside her name, financial agent. To Rachel, those words looked like authority. She did not yet understand their limits. 3 days before surgery, Mark drove me to a preoperative appointment because Rachel said she had errands. He seemed distracted the entire way. At a red light, his phone rang through the car's Bluetooth system. A man's voice came through before Mark disconnected it. "Mark, we need that payment by Friday." Mark stabbed the button. "Sorry." I looked at him. "Everything okay with the business?" "Fine." That didn't sound fine. "Supplier issue." He changed the subject immediately. I thought about asking Rachel later. I never did. The morning of my surgery, Rachel arrived at the hospital before sunrise. She carried my overnight bag, checked me in, and fussed over the thin hospital blanket as though I were freezing. For a while, she was simply my daughter again. The little girl whose hand I had held through vaccinations. The teenager whose heart I had tried to mend after her first breakup. The young woman. Daniel had walked down the aisle. When the nurse came to take me back, Rachel kissed my forehead. "I'll be right here when you wake up." And she was. The surgery went well. When I opened my eyes in recovery, everything felt heavy and distant. Rachel was beside me. "You did great, Mom." I smiled. For the first day, pain medication left me sleepy. By the second morning, I was clearer. That afternoon, I woke from a nap and heard Rachel talking near the doorway. A nurse was standing with her. Rachel kept her voice low, but the room was quiet. "Can medication like this affect someone's ability to make decisions?" The nurse paused. "Temporarily, some medications can cause confusion or drowsiness, so they wouldn't necessarily be capable of making financial decisions." My eyes opened fully. The nurse's tone changed. "Capacity isn't something I determine casually. A physician would need to assess a patient if there were concerns." Rachel noticed me watching. Her expression shifted instantly. "Mom, you're awake." The nurse left. I stared at my daughter. "What was that about?" Rachel walked to my bedside. "Nothing." It didn't sound like nothing. "I was asking about medication." "You asked about financial decisions." She sighed. "Because I wanted to know whether I should make sure you don't accidentally pay something twice or make a mistake while you're on painkillers." "I have never accidentally paid anything twice. Mom, please. You're turning this into something it isn't." I wanted to argue, but my knee throbbed, my mouth was dry, and suddenly I was exhausted. Rachel adjusted my blanket. "Rest." I did, but the conversation stayed with me. 2 days later, a hospital discharge coordinator came into my room carrying paperwork. She explained my physical therapy schedule, home safety recommendations, and follow-up appointment. Then she said, "Your daughter also requested information about assisted living options, so I included some brochures." I stared at her. "Excuse me." She pointed toward a folder. "Senior residential options. I didn't request those." The coordinator hesitated. I understood the family was considering them. "What family?" Before she could answer, Rachel walked into the room. She saw the brochures. "Oh, good." I turned toward her. "You requested these." Rachel placed her purse on the chair. "Just information. I told you I'm going home, and you are. Then why are you looking at assisted living?" She lowered her voice. "Because eventually we need to have a realistic conversation." "About what?" "About whether that house still makes sense for you." There it was again. The house. Even lying in a hospital bed with a newly replaced knee, I suddenly felt more alert than I had in days. "My house makes perfect sense to me." Rachel smiled, but her eyes did not. "Okay. No, not okay. Stop making plans for me." "I'm not making plans. You're requesting brochures." "Jordan." The discharge coordinator's voice was gentle. I looked at her. "Am I medically cleared to go home?" "Yes, assuming you have appropriate support and follow the mobility instructions." "Then I'm going home." Rachel said nothing. The coordinator gathered the brochures and left us alone. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Rachel picked up her purse. "You know I'm only trying to protect you." I looked at my daughter and felt something I had never felt before. Not fear exactly, not yet, but distrust. That evening after Rachel left, I called home. Mark answered. I could hear movement behind him, heavy movement. "What are you doing?" A pause. "Just cleaning up." "Cleaning what, the living room?" I almost asked more. Instead, I said goodnight. What I didn't know was that while I was lying in that hospital bed learning how to walk again, Rachel had already found the old power of attorney. She had already contacted people I knew nothing about. And somewhere between asking nurses about my capacity and requesting assisted living brochures, my daughter had stopped preparing for my recovery. She had started preparing for my removal. The one call I made to my lawyer, William Carter, did not frighten easily. I had known him for nearly 25 years, and I had never heard panic in his voice. He was the kind of attorney who could explain bad news without making it sound worse, and good news without pretending a problem had disappeared. So when William told me not to confront Rachel, I listened. I was still sitting in my friend Linda's car outside my own house. My walker was folded behind us. My overnight bag sat at my feet. Through the windshield, I could see the front porch where Daniel had once spent an entire Saturday replacing 3 boards because one of them squeaked. Now there was a black electronic lock where my brass deadbolt had been. "William," I said, "tell me exactly what is happening." "I will. But first, are you somewhere safe? I'm sitting in Linda's car." "Good. Stay there." Linda glanced at me. I put the phone on speaker. William continued. "A title company contacted my office this morning regarding a proposed sale of your property." I stared through the windshield. What proposed sale? That's what concerned me. He explained that someone from a title company had called because older trust records connected to the property referenced his office. A contract had apparently been submitted involving my house. The proposed sale price was approximately $760,000. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. Numbers can make something unreal suddenly feel terrifyingly concrete. $760,000. My house. My kitchen. My bedroom. The backyard where Daniel had planted a dogwood tree for our 25th anniversary. Someone had put a price on all of it while I was learning how to stand on a new knee. "Who signed the contract?" I asked. "Rachel signed documents claiming authority to act for you." Linda whispered, "Oh my God." I closed my eyes. She has a power of attorney. I suspected that might be what she was relying on. So she can do this? No. The word came so quickly that I opened my eyes. No. Not based on what I know. A small piece of the panic loosened inside my chest. William continued carefully. "Rachel appears to believe the old durable power of attorney gives her broader authority than it actually does, but her name is on it. Her name being on a document does not mean she owns everything you own, Jordan." I looked toward my house again. Behind the living room window, I could see boxes stacked near the wall. Then why did the title company take her seriously? Because she presented paperwork suggesting she was acting as your financial agent. That was enough to begin a process. It was not enough to complete it. "How close are they?" William hesitated. "That's the part you need to hear calmly." I gripped the phone. "Tell me." "The buyer is apparently paying cash." My stomach tightened. "And the proposed closing is 3 days from now." Linda turned toward me. 3 days, I barely heard her. 3 days. If my recovery had required another week in the hospital, I might not have known anything was happening. I thought about Rachel asking the nurse whether pain medication could affect financial decisions. I thought about the assisted living brochures. I thought about Mark answering my home phone while something heavy moved in the background. None of it felt separate anymore. Rachel told them I was going into assisted living, didn't she? Another pause. Yes. The humiliation hit almost as hard as the fear. "She told strangers that she represented that you were permanently relocating and that she had authority to handle the property." I never told her that. "I know. No, William. I never even considered it." "I understand." I heard myself breathing too quickly. Linda put her hand over mine. "Slow down," she whispered. I forced myself to focus. "What exactly has Rachel signed? I don't want to characterize every document until I have copies in front of me." "The title company is sending everything over. What matters right now is that you did not authorize a sale." "No." "You did not sign a sales contract." "No." "You did not instruct Rachel to list or transfer the property." "Absolutely not." "Good." His voice became firmer. "Then we deal with facts." That sentence steadied me. Facts. Not Rachel's explanations, not my guilt, not whether I had been too suspicious or not suspicious enough. Facts. I had not agreed to sell my home. "William," I said, "if she has power of attorney, what stops her? The house itself." I frowned. "What does that mean? Do you remember the estate planning Daniel and I worked on with you, some of it? Do you remember creating a revocable living trust?" I looked at Linda as though she might somehow remember for me. "Yes, I remember signing one. Your home was transferred into that trust." I was silent. William continued. The property is not currently titled simply to Jordan Bennett as an individual. It is held by the Jordan Bennett Revocable Living Trust. I tried to understand why that mattered. But I'm Jordan Bennett. You are. And you are also the acting trustee. What does that mean for Rachel? It means she cannot simply waive an old power of attorney at a title company and sell trust property as though it belongs to her. For the first time since my key failed in the lock, I felt something other than helplessness. It wasn't relief, not yet, but it was close. Can she become trustee eventually under certain circumstances, but not because she decides to? What circumstances? We'll go through those carefully. Right now, the important point is that you are alive, you are competent, and you remain the acting trustee. I looked down at my hospital bracelet. I had forgotten to remove it. A plastic band around my wrist had somehow become evidence in Rachel's mind that my life could be reorganized without me. Does being in the hospital change anything? No. Having surgery? Numb. Being 69? Certainly not. I almost laughed. Instead, tears filled my eyes. Then she can't sell it, not legally based on what you've told me. I wiped my cheek. What do we do? I am contacting the title company immediately and providing formal notice that you dispute the transaction and that Rachel lacks authority to convey the property. Will that stop the closing? It should stop this transaction from proceeding while ownership and authority are verified. Should. Jordan, I don't promise outcomes before paperwork is reviewed. You know me better than that. I did. That was why Daniel trusted him. William continued. I also want to review the power of attorney Rachel has. If she is attempting to use authority you no longer want her to have, we need to address that. I don't want her controlling anything. Saying it hurt. This was Rachel. The child whose fever I had checked at 2 in the morning. The teenager I taught to drive. The woman I had trusted enough to let into my home when she needed help. But trust was no longer the question. Then we'll take the appropriate steps, William said. I heard typing in the background. There's something else. My body went cold again. What the title company said, Rachel represented that the property needed to close quickly because your transition into senior care had already been arranged. I stared at the boxes through the window. Already arranged, not considered, not discussed, arranged. Where was she planning to send me? I don't know. I remembered the glossy brochures on my hospital table. For the first time, I wondered whether they had been brochures at all or options she had already narrowed down. Linda shook her head. This is unbelievable. I wasn't sure it was. Not anymore. William, should I call the police? Right now, I want you focused on your immediate safety and your legal position. We need documents before deciding what other action is appropriate. Should I go inside? Not by forcing entry. It's my house. I know. But you just had surgery. You're standing in the middle of a family dispute, and we don't yet know who is inside or what Rachel has told anyone. Let me handle the first legal steps. Every instinct in me wanted to march up those stairs, bang on the door, and demand answers. Then I looked at the walker behind me. Rachel may have expected exactly that, an exhausted woman fresh from surgery, overwhelmed enough to surrender. So I did something she apparently had not expected. I stayed calm. Where should I go? Stay with Linda tonight if you can. You can stay as long as you need, Linda said immediately. William heard her. Good. I want you resting. I'll send notices today, review the trust, and get copies of whatever Rachel submitted. I nodded before remembering he couldn't see me. All right. And Jordan. Yes, do not sign anything Rachel brings you. I won't. Do not agree verbally to anything about the house. I won't. And if she tells you that she has authority because of that power of attorney, call me. I looked once more at my front door. Rachel had changed the lock because she believed possession meant control. She had packed my belongings because she believed decisions made quickly would become decisions I had no choice but to accept. And somewhere a cash buyer had been told that my home was available because an elderly widow had moved on. But Rachel had missed something. Years before any of this happened, Daniel and I had sat across from William Carter and signed documents I had barely thought about since. Documents Rachel had apparently never understood. I ended the call and leaned back against the seat. Linda started the car. As we pulled away, I watched my house disappear in the side mirror. I still didn't know why Rachel needed $760,000 badly enough to do this. I didn't know how long she had been planning it. And I didn't know how much of my life she had already tried to rearrange behind my back. But I knew one thing now: the house wasn't hers to sell. And for the first time since leaving the hospital, I wasn't wondering whether my daughter would let me go home. I was wondering what she would do when she discovered that her plan had just been stopped. The protection Daniel left behind. I barely slept that night. Linda gave me the guest room on the first floor so I wouldn't have to climb stairs. She brought me water, placed my medication on the nightstand, and set my walker within reach. Everything she did was gentle. That almost made it worse, because every act of ordinary kindness reminded me how abnormal my own daughter's behavior had become. At 2 in the morning, I was staring at the ceiling when my phone lit up. Rachel. I let it ring. A minute later, a message appeared. "Mom, we need to talk before you make this worse." I read it twice. Not before we make this worse. Before you make this worse. I turned the phone face down. By 8 the next morning, William called. "Can Linda bring you to my office around 10? Yes. I have the trust documents." Something in his voice told me there was more. And I also have copies of what Rachel submitted. My stomach tightened. "I'll be there." William's office was in an older brick building not far from downtown Raleigh. Daniel and I had first walked through those doors more than 2 decades earlier. Back then, we were planning for death in the abstract. We had no idea those documents would someday protect me from our own child. William met us in the conference room. He had gray hair now, more than I remembered, and reading glasses resting low on his nose. 3 folders were arranged in front of him. "Before we start," he said, "how are you feeling physically or emotionally?" He gave me a tired smile. "Either. My knee hurts less than my family." Linda squeezed my shoulder. William nodded. "Then let's deal with the part I can help you with." He opened the thickest folder. On top was a document with words I recognized: Jordan Bennett, Revocable Living Trust. Seeing my name printed there did something strange to me. It reminded me that I had once been involved in every decision Rachel was now trying to make without me. William turned several pages. "You and Daniel created this trust primarily for estate planning and continuity. After Daniel died, you remained the sole acting trustee, and Rachel is named as a successor trustee." I felt my chest tighten. "So she does have control?" "No. Successor is the important word." He pushed the document toward me. "She does not become trustee simply because you're hospitalized, recovering from surgery, or getting older. Then if you resign voluntarily, or if the incapacity provisions are properly triggered." I thought immediately of Rachel's question to the nurse. "What does that require?" William pointed to a section. "The trust sets out a process. Rachel cannot declare you incapacitated because she believes it would be convenient. The required medical determination has to be made according to the terms here. No doctor has said I'm incapacitated. I know. I wasn't even confused after surgery." "I know that too. My knee is the problem, William, not my brain." His expression softened. "I'm aware." The anger came suddenly. Then why did she ask that nurse whether pain medication affected financial decisions? William stopped. "She did." I told him what I had overheard. Then I told him about the assisted living brochures. He removed his glasses. "That context matters." "Why?" "Because it suggests Rachel may have been thinking about the incapacity issue before you were discharged." The room went quiet. I looked at the trust again. Years earlier, when William explained these provisions, they had sounded like boring legal precautions. Now every sentence felt personal. "Whose idea was this?" I asked. "The trust, the protections." William leaned back. "Both yours and Daniel's." But Daniel was particularly insistent about making sure a successor trustee could not step in casually. That sounded exactly like my husband. Daniel trusted people, but he trusted paperwork more. He used to say a promise was wonderful until 2 people remembered it differently. William smiled faintly. "I remember Daniel asking me, What happens if somebody decides Jordan is old before Jordan decides she's old? I laughed once, then covered my mouth. Tears came before I could stop them. Daniel had been gone 4 years. Yet there he was. Not as a ghost. Not as some magical rescue. Just as a husband who had once sat in this room and asked the right question. William gave me a moment. Then he opened the second folder. This is the durable power of attorney. Rachel's name appeared there too. You did name her as an agent for certain financial matters, he explained. But a power of attorney is not a deed. It doesn't make the agent the owner of your assets, and it doesn't automatically override the structure of your trust. So she misunderstood it possibly. I looked at him. You don't believe that. I believe I need to separate what I can prove from what I suspect. That was William. Careful even when I wanted him angry for me. He turned to the third folder. These are preliminary copies from the title company. I saw Rachel's signature, my daughter's handwriting. For a moment that hurt more than anything else. This was not some stranger impersonating me. Rachel had put her own name on papers connected to selling my home. She thought this would work. She appears to have represented that she was authorized to act for you because of the power of attorney. Yes. William tapped the trust folder. But trust property is controlled by the trustee, according to the trust. Right now, that is you. Only me, only you. I breathed slowly. Then stop it. I already have. I stared at him. What I sent formal notice to the title company early this morning that the transaction is disputed, that you have not authorized a sale, and that you remain the acting trustee. And they've suspended the closing process, pending resolution of authority and title issues. 3 days. Yesterday that deadline had terrified me. Now there would be no closing in 3 days. I closed my eyes. Thank you. We're not finished. I opened them again. William folded his hands. There's something I didn't tell you yesterday because I wanted to confirm it. My relief disappeared. What Rachel contacted my office before your surgery. How long before he checked a note? Just over 3 months ago. I stared at him. 3 months? She spoke to my assistant Megan about what she asked for a copy of your trust. The room seemed to tilt. Linda whispered Jordan. I couldn't look at her. What reason did Rachel give? She said she was helping you organize your estate documents. I never asked her to do that. I know. How do you know? Because Megan followed office procedure. She told Rachel we could not release your documents without authorization from you. Megan then noted the call in your file. Did Rachel call again? Not to my knowledge. 3 months. That was before my surgery had even been scheduled. Before the hospital. Before the pain medication. Before the assisted living brochures. Rachel had been looking for trust while she was still smiling across my kitchen table. The betrayal rearranged itself in my mind. I had wanted to believe she panicked because Mark's business was struggling and I was suddenly hospitalized. But she had been asking questions before any of that could be used as an excuse. Why would she need the trust? William answered carefully. She may have wanted to understand what authority she would eventually have. Eventually. Yes, the word made me sick. I remembered Rachel asking how much the house might be worth. I remembered her saying it was too large for one person. I remembered finding her near my filing cabinet. That day I caught her in my study. What day? I explained. William listened without interrupting. She said she was looking for insurance papers. Did she remove anything I don't know? He made a note. Jordan, I want you to understand something. We have enough information to protect your authority now. We do not need to guess at every motive today. But you think this started months ago. I think the timeline requires us to take that possibility seriously. My phone vibrated. Rachel again. This time she left a voicemail. William asked, Do you want to hear it? I hesitated, then pressed play. Rachel's voice filled the conference room. Mom, I know you're angry, but William doesn't understand everything. Mark and I were trying to make sure you were taken care of. You can't stay in that house forever. Please call me before lawyers turn this into something it doesn't need to be. The message ended. Nobody spoke. Finally, I said, William doesn't understand everything. William raised an eyebrow. Apparently not. For the first time in 24 hours, I almost smiled. Then I looked at Rachel's signature again. What happens with the power of attorney? If you no longer want Rachel serving as your agent, we revoke it properly and notify relevant institutions. I want it revoked. Are you sure? Yes. There was pain in saying it, but no uncertainty. William nodded. I'll prepare everything. And the house? You remain trustee. Nobody sells it unless you decide to sell it. Those words settled over me like a blanket. Unless you decide. Not Rachel. Not Mark. Not a hospital coordinator. Me. William began gathering the documents. I touched the edge of the trust before he closed the folder. Daniel had once protected my future with a few careful questions and a signature. But another question still remained. If Rachel had been searching for the trust 3 months earlier, then my surgery had not created her plan. It had only created the opportunity to carry it out. And I still didn't know what could make my daughter need my house badly enough to plan for months, pack my life into boxes, and try to sell it before I came home. I was about to find out. The $240,000 secret. Once I understood that Rachel had been asking about my trust months before my surgery, I stopped looking at the past 6 months as a collection of unrelated moments. I started looking at them as clues. And suddenly there were clues everywhere. There had been the envelopes. Mark received most of his business mail electronically, but occasionally thick envelopes arrived at my house after he and Rachel moved in. Some had final notice printed above the address window. Others came from suppliers whose names I recognized from years of hearing Mark talk about construction. Whenever I handed one to him, he took it quickly. Just paperwork, he would say. There had been phone calls, too. Mark used to conduct business anywhere. After moving into my house, he began stepping onto the back porch whenever certain calls came through. Once I heard him say, "I told you I'm working on it." Another time I heard, "If you file that, everything gets worse." I had assumed he was dealing with a difficult customer. Now I wondered how much I had chosen not to see. Then I remembered Rachel's jewelry. 2 months before my surgery, she had stopped wearing the diamond bracelet Mark gave her for their 20th anniversary. When I asked about it, she said the clasp was being repaired. I never saw it again. The memories came faster after that. A late-night argument behind their bedroom door. Mark telling Rachel, "There isn't anywhere else to get it." Rachel answering, "Then let me handle my mother." At the time, I had convinced myself I misheard her. Sitting in William's office the morning after we stopped the sale, I repeated that conversation aloud. William's expression tightened. "You're sure that's what she said?" "I'm sure now." He nodded slowly. "Then we need to understand the financial pressure." I didn't know how much he could legally discover about Mark's private business affairs, and William was careful not to pretend he had magical access to everything. But some facts were already visible through documents connected to the proposed house sale communications Rachel had made, and information Mark himself had discussed with creditors. Over the next several days, the picture became clearer. Mark's remodeling company was not experiencing a temporary slowdown. It was collapsing. 2 large renovation projects had been canceled within months of each other. On another project, a dispute over delays had left Mark responsible for expenses he expected the client to cover. Then material costs rose. Cash flow dried up. Mark borrowed to keep crews working. When that wasn't enough, he borrowed again. Some debts belonged to the company. Others carried personal guarantees. The number that mattered most was approximately $240,000. That was what Mark and Rachel believed they needed quickly to stabilize the business, settle urgent obligations, and prevent several defaults from triggering worse consequences. 240,000, I repeated when William told me. We were sitting in his conference room again. That appears to be the immediate hole they were trying to fill. I almost laughed. Immediate hole. It sounded so small when he said it that way. Then I thought about my house. $760,000. Suddenly the arithmetic became obvious. I looked at William. They were going to use my house. He didn't answer immediately. William. Yes. The word hurt more because he said it quietly. I pushed my chair back. So this was never about assisted living. I can't tell you what Rachel believed emotionally. but the proposed transaction appears closely connected to their financial situation. Closely connected. My voice rose. They needed $240,000. They tried to sell a house worth $760,000 while I was in the hospital. How close does it need to be? Linda, who had driven me again, touched my arm. I took a breath. I'm sorry. You don't need to apologize, William said. But I did. I had spent months apologizing whenever Rachel made me uncomfortable. Apparently the habit was hard to break. What was she going to do with the rest, I asked. William opened another set of notes. That's becoming clearer too. Rachel had told people involved in the attempted transaction that I would be moving into senior housing, not a luxury retirement community, a modest apartment-style senior complex outside Raleigh. She had apparently estimated several years of rent and living expenses, enough in her mind to prove she wasn't abandoning me. I stared at the figures. So she planned to sell my house, put me in an apartment, set aside some of my own money to pay my rent, and call that taking care of me. William didn't answer. He didn't have to. The rest of the proceeds would have remained available, and Mark's company needed rescuing. That afternoon, I asked Linda to drive me past the senior complex. I didn't tell William. I didn't tell Rachel. I simply wanted to see where my daughter had imagined I belonged. The building wasn't terrible. That almost made it worse. It was clean with beige siding, small balconies, and a sign advertising community activities. A woman about my age was watering flowers outside. There was nothing wrong with the place, nothing shameful. If I had chosen it myself, perhaps I might even have been happy there. But I hadn't chosen it. Rachel had looked at my life and reduced it to an equation. One older woman, one oversized house, one struggling business. Move the woman, sell the house, save the business, problem solved. Do you want to go inside? Linda asked. No. We sat there another minute. Then I said, take me home. She glanced at me. Your house? Yes. By then, William had made arrangements so I could legally regain access without creating a confrontation. Rachel and Mark were not there when we arrived. The new lock had been dealt with. I stepped inside slowly with my walker. The house smelled different, not dirty, just disturbed. Boxes remained along the walls. Some photographs had been removed. A vase Daniel bought me in Asheville was wrapped in newspaper. I walked into the kitchen. On the counter was a notebook. Rachel's handwriting covered several pages. Most were ordinary reminders. Call insurance. Cancel storage. Mark supplier. Then I saw a page with numbers. 760,000. Underneath were deductions, fees, moving, senior rent. Then a larger number beside Mark's name. I didn't touch anything at first. I simply stared. I had spent my life teaching children that taking something without permission was wrong. Apparently, adults could make theft feel respectable by putting it in a spreadsheet. My phone rang. Rachel. For once I answered. Mom. Her voice sounded exhausted. We need to talk. Yes, we do. William has frozen everything. I know. You don't understand what you've done. I looked at the notebook. What I've done, Mark could lose the company. There it was. Not are you okay? Not I'm sorry you couldn't get into your house. Mark could lose the company. How much does he need? Silence. Rachel. Who told you how much? Another pause. It's complicated. Is it $240,000? She inhaled sharply. That was my answer. Mom, please let me explain. Were you going to use money from my house? We were going to make sure you were taken care of. That isn't what I asked. You don't need a house that big. I closed my eyes. There are moments when a relationship changes before either person says the sentence that officially breaks it. This was one of those moments. Did you intend to use my money to save Mark's business? Rachel's voice hardened. It's family money. No, it's my money. Mom, eventually. She stopped. I opened my eyes. Eventually what? Nothing. No. Finish that sentence. She wouldn't. Not yet. Instead, she changed tactics. You would have had a beautiful place to live. No maintenance. No stairs to worry about. We would have set aside enough money so you'd never have to worry. With my money. Why do you keep saying it like that because it is mine? You're making me sound like some criminal. I came home from surgery and couldn't unlock my own front door. We were trying to make the transition easier. What transition? She didn't answer. I looked around my kitchen. The same room where Rachel had eaten breakfast before school. The same room where Daniel and I had celebrated paying off the mortgage. The same room where I had welcomed Rachel and Mark because they needed help. And now my daughter was explaining why selling it without my consent had somehow been an act of family responsibility. Rachel, I said quietly, did you believe I would agree if you asked me? Silence. That answer hurt most. She knew I wouldn't. That was why she had waited until I was in the hospital. Mom, Mark is going to lose everything. I'm sorry. You can stop it. No. She went quiet. I had rarely said that word to Rachel without immediately softening it. No, but maybe. No, unless. No, not now. This time there was nothing after it. No, I repeated. She hung up. I stood in my kitchen holding the counter for balance. For the first time, I understood the logic Rachel had used to justify everything. She didn't think of herself as stealing from me. She believed she was redistributing something that would eventually become hers anyway. My home had stopped being my home in her imagination. It had become an inheritance waiting for the inconvenient formality of my life to end, and Rachel had decided she didn't want to wait. It was going to be mine someday. Rachel called again the next morning. This time she wasn't asking me to understand. She was furious. I had spent the night at Linda's house again, because William thought it was wiser, until the immediate dispute over the property was settled. My knee was improving, but every trip across a room still required patience, a walker, and more energy than I wanted to admit. I was sitting at Linda's kitchen table when my phone rang. Rachel's name appeared. Linda looked at me. You don't have to answer. Yes, I said. I do. I pressed the button. Hello? Rachel didn't bother with a greeting. Why did you revoke the power of attorney? I closed my eyes for a moment. Not, how are you feeling? Not, can we talk about what happened, the power of attorney? Because I no longer trust you with it. You're overreacting. You tried to sell my house. I was trying to solve a problem. Your problem. Our problem. No, Rachel. Mark's company is not my company. He's your son-in-law. And that makes me responsible for $240,000 of his debt. You know it's more complicated than that. I looked across the table at Linda. She was pretending to read a magazine, but I could see the tension in her jaw. Then explain it, I said. Rachel exhaled. We can't do this over the phone. You had no trouble making decisions about my house without sitting across from me. That isn't fair. I almost laughed. Fair, my voice remained surprisingly calm. You changed my locks while I was in the hospital. We changed the locks because contractors and people from Mark's business had been in and out of the garage. It was a security issue. Then why didn't you give me a key? Silence. That was the first crack. I waited. Rachel finally said, because we thought you were going directly into temporary senior housing. We, Mark and me. Who gave you permission to decide that you had just had major surgery? My surgeon cleared me to go home. You could barely walk. My knee was replaced, Rachel. My judgment wasn't. Her voice sharpened. You don't understand how vulnerable you are. And apparently, you don't understand what the word mine means. Here we go. No, we're not going anywhere until you answer me. I could hear movement on her end, then a door closing. Where are you? I asked. At a motel. For one brief second, the mother in me surfaced. I imagined Rachel sitting on the edge of an unfamiliar bed, frightened about money, frightened about Mark's business, frightened about what would happen next. I wanted to comfort her. Then I remembered standing outside my own home. Compassion did not require surrender. I'm sorry you're going through that, I said. Rachel sounded stunned. You're sorry, yes. You could fix this. There it was. What exactly do you want me to fix, you know? No. Say it. She hesitated. Mark needs capital. How much you already know. $240,000 for the immediate obligations. So there may be more. Mom. Answer me. Yes. There could be more. I leaned back. And you planned to get it from selling my house. We planned to make sure everyone was secure. Everyone. Yes. Let's talk about everyone. Where would I have lived that senior community we showed you? You showed me a website. You never asked me to move. You liked it. I said the gardens were pretty. You always twist things when you're upset. I nearly responded angrily, but something stopped me. For years I had allowed conversations with Rachel to become debates over tone. If I became emotional, she could make my emotion the problem. So I lowered my voice. Did I ever tell you that you could sell my home? No. But did I ever tell you that I wanted to move? You said the community looked nice. That isn't what I asked. No. Did I ever authorize you to use the proceeds from my house for Mark's company? Not specifically. Not specifically, I heard Linda set down her magazine. Rachel, there is no specifically. I never authorized it at all. You weren't going to lose anything. I stared at the wall. I wasn't going to lose anything. You would have had somewhere safe to live. Your expenses would have been covered. You wouldn't have had property taxes, repairs, yard work with my own money. Why do you keep saying that? That question told me more than Rachel realized. Because you keep forgetting it. I haven't forgotten anything. Yes, you have. What, that I am still alive? The line went silent. For a moment I regretted saying it. Then Rachel spoke. That is a horrible thing to say. Is it? Yes. Then explain why you were dividing the proceeds from my home without me. I was planning. For money you didn't own. For our family. My house is not a family emergency fund. Your house is worth $750,000 and you're one person living in it alone. The volume of her voice shocked me. There it was. Not concern. Resentment. I waited. Rachel continued before I could speak. Do you understand how insane this feels? You have all that equity sitting there doing nothing, while Mark could lose a business he spent 15 years building. Doing nothing. You know what I mean? No, Rachel, I don't. It's just a house. I looked toward Linda's window. Rain had begun tapping against the glass. Just a house. Maybe to Rachel. To me it was 30 years of ordinary life. Daniel painting the nursery before Rachel was born. Rachel practicing piano badly in the living room. Christmas mornings. Birthday cakes. Arguments. Apologies. Daniel's last Thanksgiving. The quiet months after his funeral when I learned how loud an empty house could be. But even if none of those memories existed, one fact would still remain. It belonged to me. Mark made bad business decisions, I said. I am sorry he is suffering the consequences. But you don't get to solve those consequences by making decisions about my life. You've helped me before. I have. You paid part of my college. Yes. You helped with our wedding. Yes. You gave us money when Sophie was born. Yes. And now when we actually need help, you're acting like strangers. Something inside me finally became clear. Every gift had become evidence in Rachel's mind. Not evidence that I loved her. Evidence that I would always pay. Do you remember what you said when you asked to move into my house? I asked. What does that have to do with anything you said 4 weeks, maybe 6? We were struggling. And I opened my home. I know. Did I charge you rent? No. Did I ask Mark to pay utilities? No. Did I complain when his equipment took over my garage? Mom, stop keeping score. I wasn't keeping score. That's the problem. She went quiet. I kept giving because I believed gratitude would create respect. Instead, you started believing my generosity meant you had a claim. I never said that. You didn't need to. I thought about the notebook in my kitchen. The numbers. My life converted into columns. You calculated what you could get from my house. We calculated what would be left after you were taken care of. Listen to yourself. Rachel began crying. Real tears. I could hear them in her breathing. Mark is terrified, she said. He hasn't slept properly in months. Suppliers are threatening him. If the business goes under, we lose everything. I'm sorry. You keep saying you're sorry like that helps. What do you want me to say? I want you to act like my mother. That struck exactly where she intended. For a moment I was no longer 69. I was 32, standing beside Rachel's bed while she had the flu. 45, driving across town because she had locked her keys in her car. 56 writing a check to help with an emergency she promised would never happen again. A mother. That word had always been Rachel's strongest key. But there are doors love should not unlock. I am your mother, I said. That's why this hurts as much as it does. Then help me. I will help you find financial counseling. I will help you find somewhere affordable to live. I will buy groceries if you are hungry. That isn't what we need. I know. We need money. No. Her crying stopped. The silence changed. Then Rachel spoke with a coldness I had never heard before. What are you going to do with all of it anyway? All of what? The house. Your savings. Everything. I didn't answer. You're almost 70, she continued. My fingers tightened around the phone. So eventually, Sophie and I are going to inherit something, aren't we? There it was. The conversation we had been moving toward from the beginning. Eventually I said I will die. Don't make it sound ugly. How should I make it sound? You know I don't mean it like that. Then tell me what you mean. Rachel exhaled sharply. That house was going to be mine someday. I said nothing. She continued, perhaps mistaking my silence for permission. You always said family takes care of family. I wasn't taking something from a stranger. I was just using part of it early. The words landed without drama. No shouting. No music. No slam door. Just one sentence that changed the way I understood my daughter. I had spent months asking why Rachel thought she had the right to sell my home. Now I knew. She wasn't thinking of it as mine. She was thinking of it as hers, delayed only by the inconvenient fact that I was still alive. I swallowed. Rachel. What? Thank you. She sounded confused. For what? For finally telling me the truth. I didn't mean I know exactly what you meant. Mom, wait. I hope Mark finds a way through his business problems. I hope you both recover financially. I truly do. You can help us. Not with my house, Mom, and never again by making decisions for me. I ended the call. My hands were trembling. Linda came around the table and sat beside me. I didn't cry immediately. I simply stared at the phone. The changed locks had humiliated me. The attempted sale had frightened me. But those things were actions. This was different. Now I understood the belief underneath them. My daughter had begun treating my future death like a financial event she was entitled to schedule early. And that was the moment I stopped asking how I could make Rachel understand me. I started asking what I needed to do to make sure she could never put me in that position again. The lie. My granddaughter believed. 2 days after Rachel told me she had only been using part of my inheritance early, my granddaughter called. Sophie was 20 and in her second year of college. Of everyone in our family, she had stayed farthest from the trouble, partly because Rachel had made sure of it. I had not told Sophie what was happening. She loved her mother. I did not want to become the grandmother who recruited a young woman into a war between generations. So when Sophie's name appeared on my phone, I expected an ordinary conversation. Instead, the first thing she said was, "Grandma, why did you change your mind?" I was sitting at Linda's dining room table doing the exercises my physical therapist had given me. About what? There was a pause. The apartment. What apartment? The senior place. I slowly lowered my leg. Sophie, who told you I was moving into senior housing. Another pause. Mom. I said nothing. Sophie continued. She said you decided before surgery that the house was getting too difficult for you. My heart sank. No. The word came out quietly. No, what I never decided that. Sophie laughed nervously. I'm confused. So am I. She said you asked her to handle the house because you didn't want the stress. I closed my eyes. Rachel had not merely tried to control my property, she had built a story around it. What exactly did your mother tell you? Sophie hesitated. Grandma, are you mad at me? Absolutely not. I thought you wanted this. I know. That was the first thing I needed her to understand. She had been lied to. She had not betrayed me. Sophie began explaining. A few weeks before my surgery, Rachel had told her that I was considering selling the Raleigh house. According to Rachel, my knee problems had made me realize maintaining the property was becoming too difficult. After my surgery, the story became more definite. Rachel told Sophie I had chosen a senior community. She said I had asked her to take care of the sale. She even described it as a fresh start. I asked if you were okay with leaving Grandpa's house, Sophie said. Mom said you were emotional but excited. I almost couldn't speak. Emotional but excited. Rachel had invented my feelings too. Sophie. I came home from the hospital and my key didn't work. Silence. What, your mother changed the locks? No. Yes. She said the locks were being updated because the house was going on the market. She never gave me a new key. Sophie's breathing changed. Grandma? She was trying to sell the house, but you told her to. No. You didn't sign anything, no. You didn't ask her to sell it, no. What about the apartment I never agreed to move? The silence that followed was painful. Then Sophie whispered, "Oh my God." I heard her begin to cry. I hated that sound. Sophie, listen to me. You did nothing wrong. I believed her. She's your mother. Of course you believed her. I told my roommate you were moving. I even said I thought it might be good for you. That doesn't matter. It matters to me. No. What matters is what you do once you know the truth. She sniffed. What happened? I gave her the simplest version I could. Mark's business was in serious financial trouble. Rachel believed my house could solve it. She found an old power of attorney. She tried to arrange a sale while I was hospitalized. William stopped it because the house was held in my trust, and Rachel did not have authority to sell it. I did not tell Sophie every cruel sentence Rachel had said. She didn't need that burden. When I finished, Sophie was silent. Then she said, "I think I saw something." What? Before I came back to campus, my body became still. What did you see? Mom was taking pictures of your house. When the day after your surgery? That made sense, listing photographs. She told me she was documenting things for insurance, Sophie said. Of course she had. Another reasonable explanation. Another small lie designed to avoid a larger question. There's more, Sophie said. I waited. I came downstairs late that night because I couldn't sleep. Dad was in the kitchen and Mom had her laptop open. What were they doing? I don't know exactly. They stopped talking when they saw me. Did you hear anything? Sophie thought for a moment. Dad asked how long they had. My hand tightened around the phone. And your mother? She said something about needing to finish before you got home. My skin went cold. Sophie, are you sure? Yes. Anything else? No. Not then. Then. The word caught my attention. What do you mean, not then? Sophie hesitated. Mom left her tablet here. Where is here? At my apartment. Apparently Rachel had visited Sophie shortly before my surgery and accidentally left an older tablet behind. Sophie had planned to return it during her next trip home. The device was still connected to Rachel's messaging account. I wasn't snooping, Sophie said quickly. I know. I opened it because I thought it was mine at first. There were notifications. What did they say? I don't remember exactly. Sophie, don't guess. I won't. Her voice steadied. I can look. Part of me wanted to tell her not to. I did not want my granddaughter reading private conversations between her parents. But another part of me understood that Rachel had already involved Sophie by lying to her. Only look at what you already saw, I said. Don't go digging through her entire life. Okay. I heard movement. Then silence. A long silence. Sophie. I'm here. Her voice had changed. What is it? There are messages between Mom and Dad. I waited. One says, "We need this done before she gets home." My heart began pounding. Read only what you can see, Sophie continued. Dad asked, "What if she refuses the apartment?" I stopped breathing for a second. What did Rachel say? Another pause. She wrote, "Once everything is arranged, she'll adjust." I closed my eyes. That sentence was Rachel in its purest form. Not she'll agree, she'll adjust. Make the decision first. Let Mother live with it afterward. Sophie spoke again. There's another one. What does it say? Mom wrote, "The biggest risk is her changing her mind once she gets home." For several seconds I heard nothing but my own breathing. Changing her mind. William had told me not to speculate when facts were available. Here was a fact. Rachel had told people I had already agreed, yet privately she worried I might change my mind once I returned home. You cannot fear someone reversing a decision unless you acknowledge that the decision still belongs to them. Grandma, yes. Should I send these to you? I thought carefully. Yes. Send screenshots of those messages. Don't alter anything. Okay. A few minutes later they arrived. I read them myself. The words were exactly as Sophie described. There was no dramatic confession. Rachel never wrote, "I am stealing Mom's house." People rarely document themselves that neatly. Instead, the messages revealed something more useful. Awareness. Rachel knew I might object. Rachel knew timing mattered. Rachel knew getting me home before everything was finalized threatened her plan. I forwarded the screenshots to William. He called within 20 minutes. "Where did these come from?" I explained. "Keep the originals," he said, "and tell Sophie not to delete anything. Do they matter? They may." "How?" "Because Rachel has been representing that you agreed to this." "Yes." "If she believed you had already freely authorized everything, why was she worried about you changing your mind when you returned exactly?" William did not overstate it. He never did, but I could hear the significance in his voice. After we hung up, Sophie called again. "I feel sick," she said. "I know. I want to call Mom." "Don't." "Why not?" "Because you're angry. She lied to me." "Yes." "She lied about you." "Yes." "How are you not furious I am?" That surprised her into silence. I continued, "Being furious doesn't mean I have to use you as a weapon. I want her to know I know. She will eventually." Sophie began crying again. I don't know whose side I'm supposed to be on. That sentence broke my heart. She was 20 years old, and the adults in her family had created a situation where love suddenly felt like a vote. You don't have to choose a side. "How can I not? Rachel is your mother. And you're my grandmother." "Yes. If she's wrong, she is wrong." Sophie went silent. I softened my voice. "But loving your mother does not require defending what she did to me." I heard her inhale. "And loving me does not require hating her." For the first time since the call began, Sophie sounded calmer. "So what am I supposed to do?" "Tell the truth when someone asks you for the truth. That's it. That's enough." That evening, I looked through the screenshots one more time. For days, Rachel had insisted that everything she did was for my safety. She had told strangers I wanted to move. She had told Sophie I was excited about a new beginning. But her private words told a different story. Before she gets home, what if she refuses? She'll adjust, changing her mind. My daughter had not misunderstood my wishes. She had understood them well enough to know they were an obstacle. And now, for the first time, I had something stronger than my memory of conversations. I had her own words. Rachel had tried to make decisions before I could return home and stop her. What she didn't know was that the granddaughter she had lied to had just handed me the proof. The boxes in my bedroom. 3 days after Sophie sent me the screenshots, I finally went home. Not to Linda's house, not to a rehabilitation center, not to the senior apartment Rachel had selected for me. Home. William had made sure the immediate legal questions surrounding my access were addressed, and Rachel and Mark had been told not to interfere. Linda insisted on driving because I was still using my walker and couldn't comfortably get behind the wheel. When we pulled into my driveway, I sat in the passenger seat for almost a full minute. "You okay?" Linda asked. "No." She waited. "But I'm going inside anyway." She smiled. "That sounds more like you." The front door looked almost ordinary. That bothered me. A door can look perfectly harmless after being used to tell you that you no longer belong behind it. I climbed the porch steps slowly. 1 step. Walker. 2nd step. Walker. By the time I reached the top, my knee was aching. Linda stayed close without touching me. I appreciated that. I unlocked the door. This time it opened. I stood on the threshold. The first thing I noticed was the silence. The second was the emptiness. Not literal emptiness. My furniture was still there. But the house no longer looked lived in. It looked prepared. The family photographs that normally covered the wall beside the staircase had been removed. Rachel's high school graduation, Sophie as a baby. Daniel and me standing on a beach in South Carolina. All gone. Small pale rectangles remained where the frames had protected the paint from sunlight. "Where are your pictures?" Linda asked. "I don't know." We moved farther inside. 2 lamps had been relocated. My collection of ceramic birds was missing from the bookshelf. A Daniel bought me during an anniversary trip had been wrapped in newspaper and placed inside a cardboard box. The box was labeled decor. I stared at the word decor. 32 years of objects I had chosen, received, dusted, repaired, and remembered had become decor. The dining room was worse. My table had been cleared completely. The embroidered runner my sister made me was gone. 2 chairs had been removed. A bowl of artificial lemons sat in the center. I had never owned artificial lemons. Linda picked one up. "Where did these come from?" "I have no idea." She put it down. I suddenly understood. Staging. What they were staging the house. The word tasted bitter. Rachel had not simply planned to sell my home. She had begun transforming it for buyers while I was still in the hospital. I could picture strangers walking through the rooms. Lovely natural light. Original hardwood floors. Quiet, established neighborhood. They would have seen a house carefully stripped of the woman who still lived there. I went toward the hallway. "Jordan, maybe you should sit down. I need to see my bedroom." "There's no hurry." "Yes, there is." I couldn't explain why. I needed to know how far Rachel had gone. My bedroom door was partly open. I pushed it wider. For a moment I didn't recognize the room. The floral quilt I had used for years was gone. In its place was a plain, cream-colored bedspread. My nightstand had been cleared except for a lamp. Daniel's photograph was missing. I stopped. Linda nearly walked into me. "What, his picture?" "What picture, Daniel?" Every night since my husband died, a framed photograph of him had stood beside my bed. It wasn't romantic in the way people imagine grief. I didn't kiss it goodnight. I didn't talk to it. I simply liked waking up and seeing the face that had shared most of my adult life. Now there was only a faint rectangle in the dust. I moved faster than I should have. "Jordan." I ignored Linda. The closet door was open. Half my clothes were gone. Several remaining dresses had been spaced evenly along the rail the way clothing hangs in model homes. On the floor were 3 boxes. Clothing. Personal. Storage. I lowered myself onto the bed. My knee protested. I didn't care. Linda opened the box marked personal. "Do you want me to?" I nodded. She lifted out my jewelry case, then several framed photographs, then Daniel. The silver frame was wrapped in one of my kitchen towels. Linda handed it to me. I ran my thumb over his face. The photograph had been taken at Sophie's 10th birthday party. Daniel was laughing at something outside the frame. For a second I could hear him, that ridiculous deep laugh that always started before the joke was finished. I pressed the frame against my chest. Then I saw another box near the closet. Daniel papers. My heart sank. I knew what was inside before I opened it. Letters. Birthday cards. Notes. Daniel had left on the refrigerator. Receipts from trips we took. A postcard he mailed from Atlanta during a business conference because he knew I hated when he traveled. Nothing valuable. Everything valuable. I opened the box. There they were. One envelope still had my name written in Daniel's handwriting. Jordan. Just Jordan. I sat on the floor because suddenly the bed felt too far away. Linda lowered herself beside me. I began crying. Not quietly, not gracefully, the kind of crying that makes your chest hurt. "I'm sorry," Linda whispered. I shook my head. "I let them in. What I let them into this house. You were helping your daughter. I gave them everything they asked for." And as soon as I said it, memories began arriving. Rachel at 18 worried about college expenses. Daniel and I paid what scholarships didn't cover. Rachel at 27 planning a wedding larger than she and Mark could afford. We helped. When Sophie was born and medical bills piled up, I wrote a check. Years later, when Mark's business had its first bad season, Daniel quietly lent them money. They never fully repaid it. We never demanded they did. After Daniel died, Rachel needed help with a car repair. I paid. When they moved into my home, I charged nothing. No rent, no utilities, no contribution toward groceries unless they volunteered. I had never kept a ledger because mothers aren't supposed to keep ledgers. At least that was what I believed. But sitting among boxes of my own belongings, I realized Rachel had kept one for me. Not a ledger of what I had given, a ledger of what remained. The house, the savings, the future inheritance. My generosity had become evidence that I would always say yes, and when I finally said no, Rachel had tried to remove the need to ask. I taught her this, I whispered. Linda turned sharply. No, I did. You taught her that you loved her. I taught her I would rescue her. That's different. Is it yes? Her answer was immediate. You can give someone 100 gifts. That doesn't give them permission to take the 101st. I looked at her. Linda rarely said anything dramatic. That was probably why the sentence stayed with me. A gift was not permission. I wiped my face. Then I began unpacking. Jordan, you don't have to do this today. Yes, I do. I took Daniel's photograph back to the nightstand. I removed the cream bedspread and found my quilt folded inside another box. Linda helped me spread it across the bed. We returned the family photographs to the hallway one at a time. Rachel's graduation picture went back too. Linda noticed. You sure she was my daughter in that picture? She's still your daughter. I know. That was the hardest part. If Rachel had been a stranger, anger would have been simple. But love doesn't disappear merely because trust does. By afternoon, I was exhausted. I sat in Daniel's old chair in the living room while Linda made tea. My phone remained silent. No Rachel, no Mark. For once I was grateful. I looked around. The house wasn't restored. Boxes remained everywhere. But my photographs were back. Daniel was beside my bed. My quilt was where it belonged. Small things. My things. That distinction mattered now. For months I had responded to Rachel as though every boundary required an explanation. Why I wanted my own mail. Why I didn't want to discuss selling. Why I wasn't interested in senior living. Why I wanted to return home after surgery. I had behaved as though ownership of my own life was a position I needed to defend. That ended in that room. I picked up my phone and called William. He answered on the second ring. Jordan, I'm home. How are you doing better than yesterday? Good. I need to ask you something. Go ahead. What do I have to do to make sure Rachel and Mark no longer have any right to stay here? He paused. I want to make sure I understand what you're asking. I invited them into my home because they needed help. Yes. They used that access to pack my belongings, change my locks, and try to sell my property. Yes. I don't want revenge. I know. I don't want their things thrown into the street. Understood. But I want my house back. William's voice remained calm. Then we'll handle it properly. Legally. Exactly. I looked at the boxes lining the wall. For the first time since leaving the hospital, I didn't feel like someone waiting to see what Rachel would do next. I felt like Jordan Bennett again. A widow. A mother. A grandmother. A woman with a healing knee and a broken heart. But also the owner of her decisions. Rachel had packed my life because she believed I would be too weak to unpack it. She had mistaken kindness for surrender, and I was finally ready to correct that mistake. This time I changed the locks. The first thing William told me was not to do anything out of anger. That irritated me. I am angry, I know. I think I have earned the right. You absolutely have. But anger and legal procedure are two different things. I was sitting at my kitchen table the morning after I asked how to remove Rachel and Mark from my home. My floral quilt was back on my bed. Daniel's photograph was back on the nightstand. Most of the boxes Rachel had packed were still scattered through the house. I wanted them gone. More specifically, I wanted Rachel and Mark gone. William explained what needed to happen to end their permission to stay in the house properly. I listened, took notes, and followed his instructions. No dramatic scene. No suitcases thrown onto the lawn. No revenge. Rachel would not be able to say I had done to her what she had done to me. When she received formal notice, she called within an hour. You're throwing us out. I was sitting in Daniel's chair with my leg elevated. I am ending the arrangement that allowed you to live here. You're evicting your own daughter. You tried to sell the house your own mother was living in. That's not the same thing. No, it isn't. She went silent. I'm doing this properly, so having a lawyer do it makes it kind no. I let that answer sit between us. It makes it clear. Rachel laughed bitterly. You've changed. Maybe I had. Or maybe the woman she remembered had simply stopped being useful to her. I asked William to make sure you and Mark have reasonable opportunity to collect everything that belongs to you. Where are we supposed to go? You told me you were staying at a motel. We can't afford that indefinitely. I'm sorry. There you go again. What would you like me to say? I want you to understand that we're in a crisis. I understand perfectly. No, you don't. Yes, Rachel, I do. Mark's company needs money. You believed my house could provide it. You decided that your emergency was more important than my consent. That isn't fair. It is exactly what happened. She hung up. 2 days later, Mark came for the first load of their belongings. Rachel did not come with him. I had asked Linda to be there not because I thought Mark would hurt me, but because I had learned something important. Being independent did not mean being alone. Mark looked 10 years older than he had when he moved into my house. His beard had grown unevenly. There were dark circles beneath his eyes. He stood in the doorway for several seconds. Hi, Jordan. Hello, Mark. His gaze moved toward the hallway. I'll just get my things. All right. He headed toward the garage. I watched him carry out tools boxes, tile samples, and equipment. The same garage that had once held Daniel's workbench gradually became mine again. After nearly an hour, Mark came into the kitchen. Can I get some water? Of course. I handed him a glass. He drank half of it without speaking. Then he said, Rachel thought you would agree. I looked at him. Did you? He stared into the glass. At first. And later he didn't answer. Mark, did you know I had never agreed to sell? His jaw tightened. I knew you hadn't signed anything personally. That wasn't my question. He looked at me then. I knew you might object. Might object. As if discovering your home had been sold while you were hospitalized were a difference of opinion over paint color. You were willing to let her do it anyway. We were desperate. I know. You don't know what it feels like to watch 15 years of work disappear. No, I don't. He looked almost surprised that I didn't argue. But I know what it feels like to come home and discover someone has packed 30 years of your life into boxes. He lowered his eyes. I'm sorry. It was the first apology I had received from either of them. It did not fix anything, but I believed he meant it. I hope you recover from this, I said. He nodded. Rachel thinks you're punishing us. Do you? Mark looked toward the garage. No. That answer probably cost him something. Before he left, he placed his old house key on the counter. It no longer worked because Rachel had already replaced the original lock, but the gesture mattered. I'll get the rest tomorrow, he said. That's fine. The following afternoon, Rachel finally came. She walked through the front door without looking at me. Sophie was not with her. I was grateful for that. Rachel went upstairs and began filling her car. On her third trip down, she stopped in the living room. You put everything back? Yes. The realtor said neutral staging would have helped. I stared at her. She realized what she had said. The realtor. Her face changed. I meant no. Don't. She closed her eyes. Mom, you were discussing staging with a realtor while I was in the hospital. I already admitted we were planning to sell. No, Rachel. You admitted you believed you had the right. That's different. She dropped the box she was carrying onto the floor. I can't keep doing this. Then don't. You've got William sending documents. You're taking away the power of attorney. You're kicking us out. You're treating me like I'm dangerous. I stood carefully. My walker was no longer necessary for every step, but I still kept it nearby. You changed my locks. I know. You packed my clothes. I know. You removed your father's photograph from beside my bed. Her face softened for the first time. I didn't know that would matter so much. That is the problem. What you didn't ask what mattered to me. Rachel looked away. We were trying to survive. So was I. You weren't going to lose your home. You were going to have another one. That sentence is exactly why you cannot have authority over me. She flinched. Do you hear yourself? Yes. No, Rachel. Do you? I pointed toward the room. You decided one home could replace another because the replacement made financial sense to you. You decided my memories were movable. You decided my preferences were obstacles. And when I didn't cooperate, you changed the lock. Her eyes filled with tears. I'm your daughter. Yes. How can you do this to me? I almost lost my temper. Instead, I heard William's voice in my head. Do not act from anger. So I answered slowly. I am not destroying your family. Rachel shook her head. That's exactly what you're doing. No. I held her gaze. I'm refusing to let you destroy me to save it. She stared at me. Then she picked up the box and walked outside. By the end of the week, their belongings were gone. The garage was empty except for Daniel's old workbench. The guest room was quiet. The house felt enormous, and for the first time that didn't frighten me. The next morning, a locksmith arrived. I stood on the porch while he removed the electronic lock Rachel had installed. He asked what kind of replacement I wanted. Something simple. He smiled. Simple is usually good. When he finished, he handed me 3 new keys. I held them in my palm. A week earlier, I had stood in the same place holding a key that no longer worked. Now the locks were being changed again, but this time the decision was mine. I gave 1 spare key to Linda. The second went into a secure drawer. Rachel received none. That afternoon I met William. He had prepared the documents necessary to revoke Rachel's remaining financial authority and update my estate plan. Are you certain? He asked. Yes. She will no longer serve as your successor trustee. Good. And you want a professional fiduciary named instead? Yes. He nodded. What about your will? That question was harder. Do I have to decide today? No. I looked through the window. Part of me wanted to remove Rachel from everything. Let her discover someday that the inheritance she had counted early had disappeared. But that would make my estate another weapon in our argument. I didn't want to become what had hurt me. I'm not disinheriting her out of anger. William nodded approvingly. But she will never control my money again. That can be arranged. I signed where he indicated. Each signature felt less like punishment and more like a boundary being rebuilt. Rachel was still my daughter. I still loved her. But love was no longer going to serve as a substitute for safeguards. When I returned home that evening, I unlocked the front door with my new key. The lock turned easily. I stepped inside. Nothing dramatic happened. No applause. No triumphant music. Just the quiet click of a door closing behind me. For most of my life, I had believed family trust meant leaving the door unlocked. Now I understood something different. Sometimes love requires a door. Sometimes dignity requires a lock. And sometimes the person on the other side is someone you still love very much. What I didn't know was that Rachel had one more way to try to get through mine. If she could no longer control the house through a power of attorney, she was going to try to prove that I should not be allowed to control it myself. She tried to prove I couldn't think for myself. For almost 2 weeks after Rachel moved out, nothing happened. No angry phone calls, no unexpected visits, no messages from Mark. The silence should have made me feel safe. Instead, it made me nervous. I knew my daughter too well. Rachel had never been comfortable leaving an argument unfinished. Even as a child, she would follow me from room to room explaining why a punishment was unfair until I either changed my mind or sent her upstairs. At 43, she had not lost that persistence. She had simply learned to dress it in adult language. My physical recovery continued. I graduated from the walker to a cane. My therapist increased my exercises. I started making my own breakfast again and even walked to the mailbox without assistance. Small victories became important. Every independent action felt like evidence that I still belonged to myself. Then William called on a Thursday morning. Jordan, are you sitting down? I laughed nervously. I hate when lawyers ask that. So do I. I sat at the kitchen table. What happened? I received notice that Rachel is challenging your ability to manage your affairs independently. For a second, I thought I had misunderstood. She's doing what she is asserting that your recent medical condition, medication, and behavior raise concerns about your decision-making capacity. My fingers tightened around the phone. My behavior. Removing her from the house. Revoking the power of attorney. Changing your estate arrangements. I stared at the new lock on the front door. She tried to sell my house, and because I stopped her, I'm irrational. That appears to be part of the argument. I stood up too quickly. Pain shot through my knee. I grabbed the table. Jordan. I'm fine. Sit down. I am not confused. I know. I know what day it is. I know where my bank accounts are. I know what medications I take. I know. I handled Daniel's funeral. I handled our taxes after he died. I have lived alone for 4 years. Jordan. His voice finally stopped me. I believe you. I sat. Tears burned my eyes, but they were angry tears. Then why am I having to prove it because Rachel is using the process available to her? The cruelty of it was difficult to explain. If Rachel had called me selfish, I could defend myself. If she had called me cruel, I could disagree. But this was different. She was attacking my right to disagree with her at all. Suddenly, every ordinary sign of aging seemed dangerous. Forgetting why I walked into a room, misplacing my reading glasses, taking longer to remember someone's name. Would those things now become evidence I was 69? I had wrinkles. I had arthritis in my left hand. I sometimes wrote grocery lists because I didn't trust myself to remember 6 items. None of that meant I had stopped being Jordan Bennett. What exactly is she saying? I asked. William read from the documents. Rachel described my recent surgery. She mentioned strong post-operative medication. She claimed I had become emotionally volatile after returning home. She suggested that my decision to force her and Mark out during their financial crisis demonstrated uncharacteristic hostility and impaired judgment. I laughed. I couldn't help it. What apparently saying no to my daughter is a medical symptom. William did not laugh. That's why we take this seriously. The fear returned. Could she actually succeed? I won't promise you an outcome. But evidence matters. What evidence? Your medical records, for one. He had already begun gathering the relevant documentation with my authorization. The hospital notes consistently described me as alert and oriented after surgery. There was no diagnosis of delirium. No physician had documented cognitive impairment. No one had declared me unable to make decisions. The medication, I asked. Post-operative pain medication can temporarily affect anyone. Taking prescribed medication does not automatically make a person legally incapable. I remembered Rachel standing near my hospital door. Can medication like this affect someone's ability to make decisions? Now the question sounded completely different. She was preparing for this even then. Possibly. She asked that nurse specifically about financial decisions. I remember. And she requested assisted living information. Yes, I felt sick. Rachel had been assembling a version of me. Not the real Jordan. A weaker one. An elderly widow. Hospitalized. Medicated. Confused. Unable to maintain a large home. Dependent on her daughter. Once that version existed, anything Rachel did could be described as protection. I want an evaluation, I said. William paused. You don't have to decide this second. I've decided. A professional capacity evaluation. Yes. If someone is going to say I cannot think for myself, I want someone qualified to examine me. William agreed. The appointment was scheduled for the following week. I hated every minute leading up to it. I knew I was competent. But once someone questions your mind's certainty, becomes strangely fragile. The night before the evaluation, I woke at 3 in the morning and tested myself. What year is it? Who is president? What did I eat for dinner? What is Sophie's birthday? I knew every answer. Then I became angry at myself for participating in Rachel's accusation. The evaluation itself was far less dramatic than I imagined. There were questions about my daily life finances, medical history, and understanding of recent events. I was asked to explain the consequences of decisions I had made. I explained the trust, the attempted house sale, why I revoked Rachel's authority, why I wanted a professional fiduciary instead. The evaluator asked one question that stayed with me. Mrs. Bennett, do you understand that your decisions may damage your relationship with your daughter? Yes. Why make them anyway? I thought carefully. Because preserving a relationship by surrendering control of my life would not actually preserve the relationship. It would only preserve her access. The evaluator wrote something down. Several days later, William called. The conclusion was clear. I was capable of understanding and managing my own affairs. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt exhausted. Is that enough? I asked. It's strong evidence. But there's more we should discuss. I knew that tone. What the screenshots Sophie preserved. I had almost forgotten about them. William had not. He asked me to come to his office. When I arrived, he had printed the messages and placed them beside Rachel's claims about my supposed incapacity. Look at these two positions, he said. He pointed first to Rachel's new argument. Your mother was too impaired to make responsible decisions. Then he pointed to the message Rachel sent Mark while I was hospitalized. The biggest risk is her changing her mind once she gets home. William looked at me. Do you see the problem I did? If she believed I couldn't make decisions, why was she worried about me making one exactly? He pointed to another message. What if she refuses the apartment? Then Rachel's reply. Once everything is arranged, she'll adjust. William folded his hands. These messages do not sound like someone acting because she believes you are incapable of expressing a preference. They sound like someone trying to get around my preference. Yes. I stared at the page. For weeks those words had hurt me because they proved Rachel knew I might object. Now they meant something else. Rachel's own private conversations contradicted the story she was telling. There was another problem for her. The title company communications. Rachel had represented that I had agreed to move and that she was acting according to my wishes. Now she was suggesting I had lacked meaningful capacity during that same period. William explained it carefully. She cannot easily have it both ways. What do you mean? If you were competent enough to decide to move and authorize a plan when she needed your supposed agreement, then claiming you were incapable because you later objected creates a serious inconsistency. I leaned back. For the first time since his phone call, I felt the fear begin to loosen. She built two different versions of me. William nodded. One when your agreement helped her, and another when my disagreement didn't. That's a fair way to put it. I looked down at Rachel's messages. My daughter had thought my age made me vulnerable. She had thought surgery made me easier to move. She had thought my love for her would make me reluctant to fight. On all 3 points, she had been partly right. I was vulnerable. I was recovering. And fighting my daughter hurt more than losing money ever could. But vulnerability was not incapacity. Age was not incompetence. And love was not surrender. What happens next? I asked. William gathered the documents. We prepare. For what? For Rachel to explain the contradictions. I looked at him. In front of me, if necessary. Part of me dreaded that more than anything. But another part knew it had become unavoidable. Rachel had already tried to decide where I would live. She had tried to decide what would happen to my house. Now she was trying to decide whether I had the right to make decisions at all. I picked up my cane and stood. My knee still hurt. I moved more slowly than I had a year earlier. I needed help sometimes. None of those things embarrassed me anymore, because I finally understood the difference between needing assistance and surrendering authority. Rachel was about to learn it too. And this time she would have to explain in front of other people why her mother was competent whenever agreement served her purpose, but suddenly incapable the moment I said no. The day Rachel had to tell the truth. The morning Rachel had to explain herself, I woke before sunrise. For several minutes I stayed in bed staring at Daniel's photograph. I had put it back exactly where it belonged after finding it packed away. You would hate this, I whispered. Daniel had disliked conflict, especially within the family, but he had disliked manipulation even more. I imagined what he might have said. Probably something simple. Tell the truth and let it stand. So that was what I intended to do. I dressed carefully, chose a navy blouse Daniel always liked, and made myself eat breakfast even though my stomach felt tight. Linda offered to come. I thanked her but declined. William would be there. and this was something I needed to walk into on my own, literally if possible. I brought my cane, but by then I could manage short distances without it. The meeting was formal enough to make everything feel painfully real. There were documents, attorneys, medical records, and people whose job was to consider whether I remained capable of controlling my own affairs. Rachel sat across from me. Mark was beside her. He looked exhausted. Rachel looked polished. Her hair was neat. Her jacket was pressed. Her face was composed. For one dangerous second, I saw the daughter who used to accompany me to school fundraisers. Then she looked away. William placed a folder in front of me. "Are you all right?" "No." He waited. "But I'm ready." The first part was almost clinical. My age, my surgery, the medications prescribed afterward, my living arrangements, the changes I had made to my estate documents. Then came the suggestion that my behavior after surgery represented a sudden personality change. Rachel described me as angry, suspicious, emotionally unpredictable. I listened without interrupting. According to her, I had returned from the hospital in a state of distress and immediately become hostile toward the people who had been caring for me. That version of events was almost impressive. It contained enough truth to sound believable. I had been distressed. I had become angry. I had stopped trusting her. What Rachel left out was why. William began with the medical evidence. My hospital records documented that I had been alert and oriented. My surgeon had discharged me home because my recovery allowed it. No physician had diagnosed cognitive impairment. No nurse had documented persistent confusion. Then came the independent evaluation I had requested. The conclusion was straightforward. I understood my assets. I understood my estate plan. I understood the consequences of changing it. I understood the conflict with Rachel. I demonstrated the ability to make informed decisions. Rachel shifted in her chair. William did not look triumphant. That was one reason I trusted him. He simply moved to the next fact, the trust. He explained that I remained the sole acting trustee. Rachel had been named only as a successor. The conditions required for her to take control had never occurred. Then William turned to the attempted sale. A copy of the proposed transaction was placed on the table. $760,000. My home reduced to a number again. William asked Rachel why she had contacted people about selling it. Rachel's answer was prepared. My mother had repeatedly discussed how difficult the house was becoming for her. I almost spoke. William touched my arm lightly. "Wait," Rachel continued. "She was having mobility problems. She liked the senior community I showed her. I believed she wanted me to begin arranging the transition." William asked, "Did Jordan tell you to sell the house?" Rachel hesitated. "She gave me authority to handle financial matters." That was not the question. Her face tightened. "No, she did not use those exact words. Did she sign a sales contract?" "No." "Did she sign anything stating she wanted to move permanently into senior housing?" "No." "Did she instruct you to use proceeds from the sale for your husband's business?" Mark looked down. Rachel said, "We hadn't finalized how funds would be allocated." I almost laughed. Allocated, as though the problem was bookkeeping. William remained calm. "Was your husband's company experiencing financial distress?" "Yes." "Approximately. How much money did you believe was urgently needed?" Rachel glanced at Mark. "About $240,000. The number hung in the room. William asked, "And your mother's house was expected to sell for approximately $760,000, yes. So the proposed sale would have generated enough money to address that immediate business need." Rachel's attorney objected to the implication, but the underlying facts remained. Rachel tried again. "My mother would have been completely provided for." That sentence finally made me look directly at her. "Provided for. Like a dependent child?" William asked, with whose money Rachel didn't answer immediately. "The proceeds from the house. Who owned the beneficial interest in those assets during Jordan's lifetime?" Rachel's jaw tightened. "My mother. Thank you." The conversation moved to the changed locks. Rachel said it had been a security precaution. William asked why I had not been given a replacement key. She said they believed I would be going to temporary senior housing. He asked whether I had agreed. Rachel said she thought I had. Then William opened another folder. I knew what was inside. Sophie's screenshots. My heart started beating faster. William placed the first message in front of Rachel. We need this done before she gets home. Rachel stared at it. Did you write this? Yes. What needed to be done? The arrangements. What arrangements? The house, moving, everything. Why did they need to be completed before Jordan returned? Rachel's face reddened. Because transitions are difficult. William placed down the next message. Mark had asked, what if she refuses the apartment? Rachel's response, once everything is arranged, she'll adjust. The room became very quiet. William asked, why would your husband ask what would happen if Jordan refused if you believed Jordan had already agreed? Rachel looked at her attorney, then at me. I thought Mom was afraid of change. That does not answer the question. Rachel said nothing. William produced the final screenshot. The biggest risk is her changing her mind once she gets home. He let Rachel read her own words. Then he asked the question that had been waiting for weeks. If you genuinely believed your mother lacked the capacity to make financial and residential decisions during this period, what exactly were you afraid she would change her mind about? Rachel froze. I watched something happen to her face. The prepared explanation was collapsing. William continued. You represented to the title company that Jordan wanted to move. Yes. You now suggest she was not capable of managing her affairs. I was concerned about her. Was she capable of deciding to move? Rachel hesitated. I thought so. Was she capable of deciding not to move? No answer. William waited. Rachel finally said she wasn't being realistic. There it was. Not incapable, not confused, not incompetent, uncooperative. William leaned back. So when Jordan agreed with your assessment, you considered her capable. When she rejected it, you considered her judgment impaired. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. That isn't what happened. For the first time I spoke. Then tell me what happened. Everyone looked at me. Rachel stared across the table. I did not recognize the expression on her face. Or perhaps I recognized it too well. She was tired of holding the story together. Mark was going to lose the company, she whispered. Mark closed his eyes. Rachel continued. We had creditors calling constantly. We were behind everywhere. He had personally guaranteed things. I thought if the company collapsed, we'd lose everything. I said nothing. I looked at your house, she said, and it was paid off. You were alone there. Your knee was getting worse. You kept saying you were fine, but I thought eventually you'd have to move anyway. So you decided eventually meant now. She began crying. I thought I could solve everything. For whom? For the family. I leaned forward. You keep saying that. Because it's true. What about my future, Rachel? She looked at me. What you were protecting Mark's future. Your future. Maybe Sophie's future. What about mine? Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. I felt tears in my own eyes. You had already decided where I would live. You had decided what would happen to my home. You had decided how my money would be used. Where was I in the future you were protecting? Rachel covered her mouth. I was scared. So was I. I didn't know what else to do. You could have asked me. You would have said no. The words came instantly. Rachel seemed to realize what she had admitted. I nodded slowly. Yes. The entire story was contained in that answer. She knew I would say no. That was why she hadn't asked. The legal issue did not require some dramatic courtroom declaration. The document's medical evidence trust provisions and Rachel's own communications told a consistent story. I remained capable of managing my affairs. Rachel's attempt to establish otherwise failed. My independence remained mine. Outside, William walked me toward his car. You did well, he said. I stopped. Then without warning I started crying. Not because I had lost, because I had won, against my daughter. William waited quietly. I never wanted her to be my enemy. I know. I used to pray she'd always come to me when she was afraid. She did come to you. No. I wiped my face. She came for what I owned. That was the wound no legal victory could repair. William opened the car door for me. Before getting in, I looked back at the building. Rachel had tried to use my age, my surgery, and my temporary weakness to prove I needed someone else to control my life. Instead, her own words had exposed the truth. I had never been incapable of making decisions. I had simply made the one decision she could not afford. I had said no. And now for the first time, Rachel would have to live with the consequences of that answer. I let consequences speak for me. For the first few days after Rachel's attempt to take control of my affairs failed, I expected to feel victorious. I didn't. There was no satisfaction in waking up and remembering that I had successfully defended myself against my own daughter. There was only quiet. Rachel stopped calling. Mark stopped contacting me. Even Sophie gave me more space than usual because she knew I was exhausted. For nearly a week, the loudest sound in my house was the ticking clock Daniel had bought at an estate sale 20 years earlier. And slowly I began to understand something. I had spent months reacting to Rachel, her questions, her plans, her accusations, her emergencies, her fear, her anger. Even after I regained control of my home, Rachel still occupied more space in my mind than she had ever occupied in my guest room. I didn't want to live like that. One morning, William called. "There may still be some practical matters to resolve," he said. "What kind expenses related to the attempted transaction? Legal costs? Other direct consequences?" I knew what he was asking without him saying it. How far did I want to go? I could stay angry. I could pursue every possible consequence available to me. Part of me wanted Rachel to feel the same fear I had felt standing outside my locked house. But I remembered something Daniel used to say when Rachel was a teenager. "Don't choose a punishment because you're angry. Choose a consequence because it teaches something." So I told William exactly what I wanted. I want to be reimbursed for direct expenses their actions caused. That's reasonable. I want every financial boundary documented, already underway. And after that, I don't want to spend the next 2 years trying to make them miserable. William was quiet. "Are you sure?" "Yes. They may interpret restraint as weakness. Then they'll misunderstand me again." That was their problem. A few weeks later, I learned Mark's remodeling company had closed. Sophie told me carefully, as if she were afraid the news would please me. It didn't. I had known the company was in trouble. Still, Mark had spent 15 years building it. 15 years of early mornings, difficult customers' estimates written at the kitchen table, and weekends spent checking job sites. Losing it must have been devastating. But devastation did not create responsibility where none existed. Without money from my house, Mark could not satisfy the immediate obligations Rachel had hoped to cover. Equipment was sold. Contracts were wound down. Some debts remained. The large office and storage space he had leased were gone. Rachel and Mark moved into a 2-bedroom rental on the other side of Raleigh. The first time Sophie told me about it, she watched my face. "They're okay," she said quickly. "I'm glad." "You are, of course." She seemed surprised. "You don't want them to suffer, no." But after everything Mom did, I stirred my tea. There is a difference between allowing someone to experience consequences and wanting them to suffer. Sophie thought about that. "I don't know if Mom sees the difference. She may someday. And if she doesn't, then I still have to live according to who I want to be." That answer was as much for me as it was for Sophie. Because anger can be seductive. It offers simple answers. Make them hurt. Make them regret it. Make them understand. But I had spent my entire adult life teaching children that understanding cannot be forced through humiliation. Why would I abandon that belief now I didn't give Mark money? I didn't pay their rent. I didn't rescue the business. But when Sophie told me Rachel was worried about groceries during the first month after the company closed, I offered one thing. "I'll buy groceries if they genuinely need food." Sophie looked startled. "Really?" "Yes. Mom probably won't accept. That's her choice. I would not allow Rachel to use my generosity as access to my finances again. But I also wasn't going to become cruel, simply to prove I had learned boundaries. There had to be a middle ground. Finding it was harder than I expected. I began speaking with a counselor recommended by a friend from church. At first, I resisted the idea. I'm not depressed, I told Linda. You don't have to be depressed to talk to someone. I know what happened. Knowing what happened and knowing what to do with it are different things. As usual, Linda was annoyingly sensible, so I went. During one session, the counselor asked what I missed most about Rachel. I answered immediately. My daughter. Then I started crying. Not the woman who changed my locks. Not the woman who tried to sell my house. Not the woman who questioned my capacity. I miss the Rachel who called on Sundays. The Rachel who brought soup when I had the flu. The Rachel who sat beside me at Daniel's funeral and held my hand so tightly my fingers hurt. Can both versions be real? The counselor asked. I hated the question. Yes. That was the painful truth. Rachel had loved me. Rachel had betrayed me. One truth did not erase the other. That realization helped me stop rewriting my entire life. I didn't need to decide that every loving thing Rachel had ever done was fake. I only needed to accept that love had not prevented her from becoming entitled to something that wasn't hers. Sophie continued visiting. Sometimes we talked about Rachel. Most of the time we didn't. We watched old movies. She helped me reorganize the kitchen after months of Rachel putting everything where she thought it belonged. I taught Sophie how to make Daniel's cornbread recipe. One Sunday afternoon, she asked a question while we were washing dishes. If Mom apologized, would you forgive her? I dried a plate slowly. I don't know. You still love her. Yes. So wouldn't that mean forgiving her no? Sophie frowned. I put down the towel. Love and trust are not the same thing. I know. Do you? She shrugged. I continued. I can love your mother and still never let her manage my bank account again. Sophie smiled slightly. That makes sense. I can hope she is happy and still refuse to give her a key to my house. That one definitely makes sense. I laughed. Then I became serious. And you can love your mother without defending what she did. Sophie looked down. I still feel guilty. For what? For giving you those messages. You told the truth. But they hurt her. Her actions hurt her. I touched Sophie's hand. I will never ask you to choose between us. What if Mom does? Then remember that choosing truth isn't the same as choosing a person. She nodded. Over the following months, my world began expanding again. My knee healed enough for me to walk without the cane. I returned to lunch with former colleagues. I joined a volunteer reading program at a community center twice a week. The first morning I walked into a room of second graders, and one little boy asked whether I knew every book ever written. I laughed harder than I had in months. I began gardening again. Not because the yard needed me, because I wanted to. I planted lavender beside the back steps. Daniel had hated lavender. He said it smelled like fancy soap, I told Linda. So why plant it? Because he's not here to complain. She stared at me. Then we both laughed until my side hurt. That was healing too. Not forgetting Daniel, not forgetting Rachel, simply allowing my life to contain something besides loss. One afternoon, I stood in the garage looking at Daniel's old workbench. For months, Mark's equipment had covered it. Now it was clear again. I ran my hand across the scratches in the wood. My phone buzzed. For one hopeful second, I thought it might be Rachel. It wasn't. I was disappointed. And that taught me something else. Boundaries had protected me from Rachel. They had not stopped me from missing her. I had thought strength would feel like no longer caring. Instead, strength felt like caring without surrendering. Months passed. Rachel did not call. I did not chase her. For the first time in my life as a mother, I allowed my adult child to be responsible for the distance she had created. I had spent 43 years trying to catch Rachel whenever she fell. This time I stepped back. Not because I wanted her on the ground, because she needed to learn she could stand without using me as something to climb over. Mark's company was gone. Their lifestyle had changed. The house they thought would rescue them remained mine. No dramatic revenge had been necessary. I had simply removed myself as the solution to problems I did not create. And consequences had done what my anger never could. They forced Rachel to live in a world where my money was no longer available to protect her from every bad decision. The only question left was whether losing that access would teach her to resent me or finally teach her to see me. The apology without an excuse. Rachel's letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. Not an email, not a text message, a letter. I recognized her handwriting before I even opened the envelope. For several minutes, I left it on the kitchen counter. 6 months had passed since the legal fight over my independence ended. During that time, Rachel and I had not spoken directly. Sophie mentioned her occasionally. Mark had found steady work managing renovation projects for another contractor. Rachel had taken additional hours at her job. Their apartment was smaller than the home they once rented, and money was still tight. But they were surviving. Without my house, without my savings, without me rescuing them. Eventually, I opened the envelope. The letter was short. Mom, I know I have no right to ask you for anything. I am not asking for money help or access to the house. I would like to see you. I owe you an apology that I should have given you months ago. If you don't want to meet me, I will understand. Rachel. I read it 3 times. The sentence that caught my attention was not the apology. It was the clarification. I am not asking for money. Rachel knew what I would fear. That meant she had finally begun understanding what she had done. I called William. Not because I needed legal permission to see my daughter. Because I had learned that good decisions did not become less independent simply because I asked for advice. She wants to meet, I said. What do you want? I don't know. That's not unusual. What would you do? William laughed softly. I'm your attorney, not your mother. Very helpful. Meet her if you want to hear what she has to say. Don't meet her because you think motherhood requires it. That stayed with me. I called Rachel that evening. She answered after 1 ring. Mom. Her voice almost broke me. Hello, Rachel. Silence. Then, thank you for calling. I received your letter. I wasn't sure you would open it. I almost didn't. I understand. No defensiveness, no accusation. That was new. We agreed to meet Saturday morning at a cafe halfway between our homes. Neutral ground. I arrived 10 minutes early. Rachel was already there. For a moment I stood near the entrance watching her. She looked older, not dramatically, just enough for me to notice. Her hair was pulled back simply. She wore no jewelry except her wedding ring. The expensive handbag she once carried everywhere had been replaced by an ordinary canvas tote. Then she saw me. She stood. Hi, Mom. Hello. Neither of us attempted a hug. I sat across from her. Rachel had already ordered coffee but hadn't touched it. How's your knee? She asked. Good. I'm walking 3 miles most mornings now. Her eyebrows lifted. 3 miles? Not quickly. She smiled. It disappeared almost immediately. I'm glad. We sat in silence. Finally I said, you asked to see me. Rachel wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. I practiced this conversation about 50 times. That sounds exhausting. It was. I waited. She inhaled. I'm sorry. My chest tightened. Rachel continued before I could respond. I'm not going to say I was trying to help you. I looked at her. I told myself that for months. Even after everything happened, I kept saying it because it made what I did sound less ugly. She stared into her coffee. I was scared. I said nothing. Mark's business was collapsing. Every day there was another call, another bill, another threat from someone we owed. I stopped sleeping. Mark stopped sleeping. And I started looking for a way out. Her fingers tightened around the cup. Then I looked at your house. There was no easy way to hear those words. Rachel continued. It was paid off. You had retirement income. You had savings. And I started thinking that you had more than you needed while we were drowning. I felt anger stir. Rachel saw it. I know how terrible that sounds. It sounds entitled. It was. The admission stopped me. She did not argue. I kept telling myself you were getting older, she said. I told myself the stairs would become difficult. The yard was too much. Your knee hurt. Every true thing became another excuse. That's exactly what it was. I know. She wiped her eyes. Then I started thinking about the inheritance. I remained still. Rachel looked directly at me. I began thinking of your house as something that would eventually be mine. I remembered the sentence from our phone call. It was going to be mine someday. I know I said. But I didn't understand what that thought had done to me. What did it do? It made me stop seeing the difference between what might happen someday and what I had a right to now. For the first time, Rachel was describing the betrayal in words I could recognize. She continued, I found the old power of attorney. I thought it gave me more authority than it did. I called William's office looking for the trust because I wanted to know what stood in the way. The honesty hurt. But it was better than another excuse. And the hospital, I asked. Rachel looked down. I knew surgery would create an opportunity. There it was. No misunderstanding, no confusion. Opportunity. My voice became quiet. When you asked the nurse about my capacity, I was trying to find out whether I could make decisions while you were recovering, and the assisted living brochures I had already been looking at places. I swallowed. Before asking me, yes, we sat with that. Then I asked the question that had stayed with me longer than any other. Why did you change the locks? Rachel began crying. Not loudly. She pressed a napkin beneath one eye. I knew you'd come home. That doesn't answer me. I knew that if you walked back into the house and saw what we were doing, you would stop everything. My heart pounded. So Rachel looked at me. I thought if the house was already staged, the buyer was committed, your things were packed and somewhere else was ready for you, you would be too tired to fight all of it. Even though I had suspected exactly that, hearing her say it hurt differently. You wanted to overwhelm me. Yes. A woman coming home from surgery. Yes. Your mother. Rachel covered her mouth. Yes. I looked away. People around us were drinking coffee, working on laptops, talking about ordinary Saturday things. Meanwhile, my daughter had finally admitted the one truth I had needed. She had not locked me out because she thought I was unsafe. She had locked me out because she thought exhaustion would become consent. I don't know if I can forgive that, I said. I know. I may never trust you the way I did. I know. You will never control my finances again. Rachel nodded. You will never be my financial agent. I understand. You will not have access to my trust documents, accounts, or property decisions. I understand. If I get sick again, you don't automatically become the person who decides what happens. Her face crumpled slightly, but she nodded. I understand. I studied her. You aren't going to argue no. Why? Because those are the consequences. That was when something inside me softened. Not healed, not erased, softened. What do you want from me, Rachel? She answered immediately. Nothing. That isn't true. She thought about it. Okay. I want the chance to become your daughter again. I felt tears rise. You never stopped being my daughter. It felt like I did. No. You stopped being someone I could trust. She nodded. I know. That's different. Can trust come back? I don't know. She looked disappointed but did not protest. I'm willing to find out, I said. Her eyes lifted, slowly. Yes, with boundaries. Yes. And if you ever ask me about inheritance again while I'm alive, I may throw my coffee at you. Rachel laughed through her tears. I did too. It was the first time we had laughed together in almost a year. When we left the cafe, Rachel hesitated near her car. Can I hug you? The fact that she asked mattered. I opened my arms. The hug was brief, careful, nothing like the effortless embraces we once shared. But it was real. Driving home, I understood something about forgiveness I had never understood before. Forgiveness was not returning someone's key. It was not restoring their access. It was not pretending the locked door had never existed. Sometimes forgiveness was simply opening the door yourself, standing firmly on your own side of it, and deciding how far another person was allowed to enter. Rachel had finally apologized without asking me to erase the consequences. That did not rebuild trust, but for the first time it gave us somewhere honest to begin. The day I chose to sell my house. Almost a year after the morning I came home from the hospital and discovered my key no longer worked, I stood in my kitchen, holding a real estate brochure. The irony was not lost on me. I was going to sell my house. My decision. Those 2 words changed everything. By then, my knee had healed beautifully. I could walk without a cane, drive wherever I wanted, work in the garden, and climb the stairs without gripping the railing like my life depended on it. Ironically, becoming physically stronger helped me admit something I had refused to consider when Rachel tried to force the decision upon me. The house was becoming more than I wanted, not more than I could handle. That distinction mattered. I could mow the lawn if I wanted. I could hire someone to clean the gutters. I could keep climbing the stairs. But after everything that happened, I began asking myself a question no one else was allowed to answer for me. What did I actually want the next 10 or 15 years of my life to look like? The answer surprised me. I wanted less house, more life. I wanted to travel occasionally with Linda. I wanted to volunteer more. I wanted a small patio where I could drink coffee without thinking about 3 flower beds that needed weeding. And I wanted a guest room for Sophie. So I called William. I'm thinking about selling. There was silence. Then he said, "Your house, yes. Should I sit down?" I laughed. "You're very funny. Jordan, after the year we've had, I need clarification. I want to sell it. Does Rachel know? No. Is Rachel involved? No. Did anyone pressure you? No. Are you sure, William?" "All right." I could hear the smile in his voice. "What changed? Nothing. That's the point." I looked around the kitchen. I'm not leaving because someone decided I'm too old to stay. I'm leaving because I finally decided I don't need to prove I can. William became quiet. Then he said, "That sounds like a very good reason." This time I chose the realtor. Her name was Patricia Moore, a woman in her 50s who had sold several homes in my neighborhood. The first thing I told her was simple. "I'm not in a hurry." She nodded. "Then we won't behave like you are." That sentence alone made me like her. We walked through every room. Patricia suggested repairs, fresh paint in 2 areas, minor landscaping, a new light fixture in the dining room. Then we reached my bedroom. She looked around. "We can simplify this for photographs." I knew what she meant. Remove personal items, neutralize the space. A year earlier, seeing my belongings packed for staging had broken my heart. Now I smiled. "I'll do it." The difference was consent. I packed Daniel's photograph myself. I wrapped the frame carefully and placed it in a box marked "New Bedroom." Not storage, not personal. New bedroom. I packed our letters too. Each box felt different when my own hands closed it. Sophie came home from college one weekend to help. She found me sitting on the floor surrounded by photographs. "Grandma, you're supposed to be packing." "I am. You've been looking at the same album for 20 minutes. That is part of packing." "No, that's procrastinating." I handed her a photograph of Rachel at age 7 with 2 missing front teeth. Sophie burst out laughing. "I'm keeping this." "No, you're not. Mom needs to see it." We spent the afternoon laughing. For the first time, boxes did not symbolize someone removing me. They represented movement, choice, a future. Rachel learned about the sale from me. I invited her for coffee. Our relationship had been rebuilding slowly. She visited occasionally. She called, but not every day. She had never again asked about my accounts, trust, or will. That mattered more than any apology. "I'm selling the house," I told her. Her face went completely still. For 1 second I knew exactly what she was thinking. Then she said, "Okay. Just that. Okay. You don't want to know why, only if you want to tell me." That answer told me how much had changed. "I found a smaller place. Do you like it?" "I love it." "Then I'm happy for you." No question about the price. No question about proceeds. No question about what I plan to do with the money. I studied her. "You've learned." Rachel smiled sadly. "The expensive way." So did I. My new home was a single-story house in a quiet community about 15 minutes away. 2 bedrooms, a bright kitchen, a small garden, a covered patio, community walking trails. Best of all, the second bedroom had a large window Sophie immediately claimed as her room. "It is a guest room," I corrected. "I'm the guest. Other people may visit. They can have the couch." I laughed. When an offer came on my old house, Patricia brought it directly to me. I read every page. William reviewed the legal details. I chose the closing date. I decided what I would accept. I decided what I would reject. There was no secret cash buyer, no hospital bed, no power of attorney, no one discussing my future behind my back. The house eventually sold for a price that gave me more than enough to purchase my new place and invest the remaining proceeds for my own retirement. Not Mark's business, not Rachel's emergency fund, mine. Mark had found stable work by then. He was earning less than he had when he owned the company, but according to Rachel, he slept better. Sometimes losing what you were desperately trying to save reveals how much it was already costing you. On moving day, Rachel arrived early. She wore jeans and carried coffee. "What do you want me to do?" I pointed toward 3 boxes. "Those go to the new house." "Yes, ma'am. No arguments, I'm trying something new." We smiled. There was one detail I noticed. Rachel never asked where the closing papers were. She never asked about the sale proceeds. She never offered to handle anything financial. She carried boxes. That was all. And somehow that was enough. By late afternoon, the house was almost empty. Linda had gone ahead to the new place. Sophie and Mark were unloading furniture. Rachel was outside. I asked for 5 minutes alone. I walked slowly through the rooms. The dining room where Daniel and I celebrated anniversaries. The living room where Rachel opened Christmas presents. The hallway where we measured her height against the doorframe until she was 16 and complained that we were embarrassing her. My bedroom. The kitchen. Finally, I stepped onto the back porch. The dogwood Daniel planted was taller than the roofline now. For years I had thought leaving this house would mean leaving him. It didn't. Daniel wasn't in the walls. He was in the woman I had become while living inside them. I returned to the front door. In my hand was the old brass key I had used before Rachel changed the locks. I had kept it. It no longer opened anything. For months I had considered throwing it away. Instead, I held it one last time. A year earlier, standing on that porch with a useless key had made me feel powerless. I had believed the locked door was the betrayal. It wasn't. The real betrayal was someone else deciding that my wishes no longer mattered. Now I understood the opposite was also true. Freedom was never really about having a key. Freedom was having a choice. Rachel approached quietly. "You ready?" I looked at her. "Yes." She glanced at the key in my hand. "You kept that I did." Her eyes filled with regret. "I'm sorry. I know. I did not need another apology." I placed the old key in my purse and walked toward the car. At closing, I handed the current keys to the new owners myself. A young couple. They were excited. The woman told me they hoped to raise a family there. I smiled. It's a good house for that. Then I walked away. Not displaced. Not defeated. Not removed. Ready. That evening, I sat on the patio of my new home while Sophie unpacked dishes inside. Rachel came outside carrying 2 glasses of iced tea. She handed one to me. "Do you miss it yet?" "The house." She nodded. "A little." "Do you regret selling?" "No." She smiled. "I'm glad." We sat quietly. Our relationship was not what it had been. I no longer believed that love guaranteed good judgment. Rachel no longer believed that being my daughter gave her authority over my future. Maybe what we had now was less innocent, but it was more honest. I eventually sold the house my daughter tried to take from me. The difference was simple. This time nobody changed the locks. Nobody packed my life without asking. Nobody decided where I belonged. I chose the realtor. I chose the price. I chose the house I moved into. I chose when to leave. And most importantly, I chose what came next. My daughter had once looked at my age and seen a woman whose decisions could be replaced. I looked at the same age and finally understood something she had forgotten. 69 was not the end of my independence. It was simply the beginning of a chapter I intended to write myself.